So how can you get the highest score for your AP tests? I'm going to give a specific example from the AP US Government and Politics scoring guide. You can find this on page 186 of the AP US Government Politics course and exam description. I had a chance to talk to a reader, and what they do is they look at thousands of these free response questions. They're usually trained to look at one of those questions, and then they look through many different samples, and they're using a rubric to score them. Once again, even though the free response questions are different, what the principle remains the same, that it's divided into parts, and you want to make sure that you hit each part. For example, in this question here, the sample that's given on page 186, they give a scenario and then you're responding to A, B, and C. For example, describe the action being taken by the National Association of Home Builders in this scenario. Part B is explaining how the action described in Part A affects policymaking in Congress. And then C is asking another group interested in conserving land in California supports a Democratic candidate in the election. Rather than having 140,000 members, the group is led by very wealthy families. Explain how the difference will likely affect the conservationist group strategy in the election. So if they're asking for three parts, you're going to want to answer all three parts to get the highest score on this. And once again, I did mention how a rubric is being used. So you can see how there's, for that question, it's worth 3 points. Different questions are worth different amounts of points, but each free response question actually is the same percentage points when it comes to the total score for the AP examination. These points just calculate the total number of points for that particular question. So in order to get each point, there's different pieces. For example, remember how we talked about the three separate parts? So if you describe the action being taken by the National Association of Home Builders, you're going to get 1 point there. That second part, explain how the action described in Part A affects policymaker in Congress. You can see how some examples are provided on how the person who is scoring this might potentially, what they might potentially be looking for. And if they see those points, then they're going to give you that point. But once again, this is not an answer booklet. This is a guideline. It's a guideline that scorers are using, readers are using to give points. So if you give an example that's relevant, it's very possible that you can get a point on that because these are acceptable explanations. But then there are other acceptable explanations that may not be on this particular rubric. So it's always good to try to provide an acceptable explanation for each of the parts. And this is the case even if you don't have all the information about that particular topic. I think it's worth making an attempt. And then you see that third part, explain how this difference will likely affect the conservationist group strategy in the election. Once again, acceptable explanations include, and there's some possible responses. So once again, even though you don't get the, if a person were to attempt this question and let's say one didn't know all the different pieces, you can still get a lot of points. Maybe you'll get point A, the point for point A, the point for B, and not C. But 2 is much better than 0. So attempting each of these sections, giving it your best go, is a great way to get the highest score possible on the AP GoPo exam and other AP tests as well.